allies, 29 minus us, have basically held up Article 5 saying, okay, maybe we aren't spending enough on defense, but we know that if the Russians come into our backyard, you Americans are obligated under the treaty, Article 5, to come to our rescue. So why in the world should we invest as much?
And McGinnis says NATO's dependency on forward bases in Germany has changed.
Since the Cold War, they have erased most of the infrastructure that we would need to rush to the rescue. Now, meanwhile, you've got the Poles and the Baltic nations and Hungary and Ukraine that are welcoming to us and allowing us to provide more defense far forward, which, of course, is the topic of what Trump and Putin are going to be talking about in a couple of days there in Helsinki.
I'm Chad Groening.
Federal health officials tracking a salmonella outbreak say consumers should not eat a popular breakfast cereal now identified as the source of people getting sick. Edmund Brown reports.
A tweet from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control warns, do not eat Kellogg's Honey Smacks. The agency blames the cereal for at least 100 people in at least 33 states becoming infected with salmonella, with about a third of them being hospitalized. CDC says if you have Honey Smacks at home, throw them out. If you work in food service, don't serve Honey Smacks. The warning applies to Honey Smacks in all sizes of boxes and with any expiration or packaging dates. And if you store Honey Smacks cereal in containers other than the original boxes, discard the cereal and wash the container. Eben Brown, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
You mentioned your faith. I know you're Catholic. I know that your faith is extremely important to you. You have not been shy about talking about that. When you're in that moment, when you were hit, I can't imagine, what that's like, but how did you get through it? Were you talking to God? Were you praying the whole time?
Ainsley, I didn't stop talking to God. From the moment of impact, very loudly. I was not quiet. I bless and thank you to all the first responders and the people that were on site. A beautiful woman who goes to a church that I visited, Miss Diane, the seconds after impact, it seemed, was handing me her phone, and I couldn't breathe because my lung had been punctured by my ribs and I couldn't catch my breath, but I gave her my husband's cell phone number. She called him from the site, and it was from that point on, I mean, I knew that I had severed my stomach, basically the seatbelt. The airbag saved our lives, and if you don't believe in God, look at this face. I mean, other than the bruise on my lip, Jackie and I have no facial trauma, no neurological damage. If you don't understand that was God's good embrace holding me and Jackie, you need to believe. But all the way in the EMS drivers and the paramedics, I was talking to God the entire way. I never lost consciousness through the entire event, which is insane. When the sheriff came to do my statement and interview, I remembered every detail. It's indelible in my mind, and it's just something that I thank God for, because I'm thankful to every face that helped me and every soul that worked, as such an amazing team to save my life. I'm just so in debt and in gratitude.
God always has a plan. He has big plans for you. You have 3 children and 3 grandchildren, and you need to be around to watch them grow up.
And another one on the way.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thanks for being here today. Welcome to the show. It's Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And we are just, it's Friday, y'all. It's Friday. Getting ready to go into the weekend. We have so much for you today on the last show of the week, heading into the weekend, where I hope you'll unplug, rest, relax, spend time with family, do whatever you like to do on the weekend, and hopefully including ending off with Sunday in church, getting in the pew, refreshing, starting off for next week. today on the program, we're going to be speaking with Joel Gilbert. He's a Hollywood film director and foreign policy analyst. He's going to come on and talk with us in hour 2. Here in hour 1, we have a lot of content because we had some breaking news today. Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein shared with us that there are more indictments. No Americans, nobody in the Trump administration, but yeah, more indictments for the meddling in the election in 2016. So we'll get into a little bit of that. We're going to talk about President Trump's whirlwind European tour that he's on. He's now in Great Britain, and he's been mixing it up with Jim Acosta from CNN. Always good clips out of that one. And so we're going to talk about that as well. Check us out at StacyOnTheRight.com, UrbanFamilyTalk.com, and AFR.net. You'll love the content at all 3 of those sites. Hit the subscribe button and stick with us there. And we also want you to subscribe on YouTube and Facebook, Periscope. Yeah, hit the like button, hit the heart buttons, and share the show everywhere that you might be tuning in today. So you were just listening to Katie Arrington, who was seriously injured in a major car accident a few weeks ago. She was on Fox News, and just really, I thought her testimony was beautiful because she talked about how she prayed all the way through. She was awake and lucid throughout, even though she'd broken 2 of her ribs and punctured her lung. One of her ribs actually went through her lung. And she also had a severe stomach injury. She fractured both of her feet. And the lady who actually caused the accident, who was drunk driving, was actually killed in the accident. And Katie even asked for prayer for her and her family as the family goes through the loss. Apparently she was a mom, married. So they've lost this member of their family, as well as the injuries that she sustained. And Katie Arrington is, she's a Christian, she's Catholic, and she's really coming out swinging here. She's a South Carolina state rep. She's also a congressional hopeful. She's running for Congress. And it's just been a real, a crazy story. Right after she wins this primary, then she has this accident. And so listening to her talk about her faith and how she talked to God the whole way through, and how grateful she is, instead of focusing on the fact that she's, temporarily in a wheelchair right now and she has quite a recovery ahead of her, she shows back up on Fox News to sing the praises of the glory of God and how grateful she is that he took care of her in this moment. And I wanted to, as we start off this Friday afternoon show, just give some relevant scriptures that go along with this, because sometimes we forget, we pray on your way out, pray when you start the car up, just say a quick prayer for safety and thank God for the opportunity to go out and travel. And remember that he has many, many times spoken to us through his word about safety and about him being our protector. And so I love these scriptures because when we root ourselves in scripture and we take the time to read God's word and to really focus ourselves in on that, it lifts us up, it makes us wise. And these scriptures come back to us when we're in these moments, such as Katie was. God never promised us that we wouldn't have any accidents or nothing would ever happen to us physically in this world. We're subject to what goes on here, but he did promise never to leave and forsake us. So one of my favorites is Romans 8:31. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who is against us? For you have made the Lord my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your tent. And that's Psalm 91, 9-10. And I just want you guys to remember that, and we can take comfort in these scriptures. Proverbs 18:10 says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe. So let's go with that. Now, let's get to the breaking news. There's breaking news today, which it was interesting because instead of them saying exactly what the press conference is going to be about, they just had a general tweet go out saying there's going to be a press availability, a law enforcement announcement from Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. And so that's what happened. He steps up to the podium. Everyone's gathered in the White House briefing room. If I'm not mistaken, it's not the same one that Sarah Sanders is in every day. It might have been an alternative location, maybe the Eisenhower Executive Office Complex. Not sure. It looked like a different room. And so he steps up to the podium and he starts to share. I mean, he just launched right into it. No preamble whatsoever. And the surprise Russian indictments announcement basically boils down to a few key salient points. And those are that there is no allegation in this indictment that Americans knew they were corresponding with Russians. So this isn't about any Americans at this point, not the announcement that was made today. Now, does this mean there won't be indictments of Americans or that they're not working on something more? Obviously not. We don't know what else they're working on. We don't know what other announcements they plan to make, if there are any other indictments forthcoming. We just know what he shared with us today. There is no allegation that there were corresponding with Russians, these Americans who did so, that they knew that they were corresponding with Russians. There's no allegation in the indictment that any American citizen committed a crime. There is no allegation that the conspiracy changed the vote count or affected any election result. And today's charges include no allegations of knowing involvement by anyone on the campaign, no allegations that the alleged hacking affected the election result. And this is consistent with what we have been saying all along. So they're placing the blame squarely on the shoulders of Russians, Russian agents, Russian operatives, members of the Russian government who were either in the United States at one point or were not, but all engaged in activities involving hacking into spear phishing attempts, getting into the DCCC email accounts, the Democratic National Committee, all of the stories that were eventually let out, the emails that went to WikiLeaks, etc. All of that is a part of this. And so, you know, what's interesting about this is the timing. Now, clearly, it could have been that, and he did talk a little bit about that. He had a lengthy time before the podium, and he spent it talking the whole time. It was fascinating to watch because he really just expounded on everything that was going on up to this point. He explained it all. He talked a little bit about AG Rod Rosenstein, talked a little bit about so they have the process of getting the indictment. So they had to seek out the indictment, obviously, and had to go before a grand jury. And then they returned the indictment, which then they were able to share. So apparently, according to him, the preponderance of evidence provided gave the grand jury cause to issue an indictment for these Russians. Now it remains to be seen what the Russians will do in response. And it's interesting, again, the timing, because the president's next stop after he leaves Great Britain, I believe he's going to his golf course in Scotland, according to the press information that I've received from the White House. He'll be in Scotland at Trump International Doral. It's a golf course in Scotland, a beautiful facility that they own there. And then I believe after that is when he will then travel to meet with President Putin. So it's an interesting time for them to make the announcement about the indictment against the Russians just before he plans to actually meet with President Putin for them to have a meeting and a discussion. Now, at numerous points over the European visit to NATO and since he's been in Great Britain, the president has discussed at length, whenever he's asked, that he plans to broach the subject of the election meddling with President Putin. He also has said he expects that Putin will deny it, that he will say that this didn't happen. So the issue is, for us as Americans, we know that we've meddled in elections for people, other countries. In fact, Barack Obama specifically meddled in the elections in Israel. And we have done this before in other nation states. So I'm not saying that like, well, they did it, we did it, it makes it all okay. But this is something that countries do. They try to seek out an election result that'll be favorable to their foreign policy aims. And not all countries do it. We don't do it in every election in every country around the world. But clearly we exercise this purview, if you will, when we feel it's necessary. It remains to be seen if, because I honestly don't think the American people have an opinion on it. Now that it's happened here in our country and it's been something obvious that the Democrats try to use to capitalize on the fact that they ran a really bad candidate, this is where the rubber meets the road, where will Americans now say we shouldn't do that? We shouldn't engage in meddling in the elections of other countries. Of course, you know, we're nation builders. We're all over the place with our troops and our bases, and really, our foreign policy is not just a matter of us participating. It's a lot of directing and behind the scenes stuff. And so will Americans begin to formulate a kind of resistance or opposition towards us meddling in the elections of other countries? Will Americans see our meddling in other countries in the same way that we seem to oppose other countries meddling in our elections? It's interesting that the reaction that's been had. And I'm not going to pretend like we as Americans don't hold two separate minds on these types of things, where we're perfectly fine doing things in other countries, but we would never accept those countries doing those things in our country. That's something that has been a part of the American ethos since pretty much day one. But what happens now? Now that this indictment has been leveled, now that the president's going to meet with Putin after the leveling of this indictment against the Russians, and the conversations that they're undoubtedly going to have surrounding this indictment, the announcement being made publicly just right before he's supposed to see him, Trump is supposed to see Putin. Well, what exactly will Putin make of it? What will be his public response to it? Obviously, they have to have some kind of reaction to it. They have thus far just simply engaged in flat out denials. We don't know what you're talking about. We didn't do this. It's not us. We're not the ones who are guilty of this. But now that there's an indictment, that means that there'll be some evidence forthcoming. The people who have been indicted will have the ability to review the evidence. They'll be able to see what it is that was able to get the indictment against them. So that will be interesting. It also comes at an interesting time with Peter Strzok being, the past couple of days has just been all about Peter Strzok. And of course, Lisa Page, I'm assuming since it's the afternoon, hey, hi, we're live on the radio. We're not seeing Lisa Page. We didn't see her at Capitol Hill this morning. That would have been at the top of Drudge had she showed up at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So we know she didn't appear for her subpoena. So there'll be contempt of Congress charges for her. So the stories are competing. They're both interesting and they're both relevant to us right now. It's time to get this stuff wrapped up. I'm glad to see something handed out so we can get to the end. What we're going to do now is head into the break. When we get back, we'll be talking about Air Force One. The president has ordered a new replacement Air Force One for a little over $4 billion after negotiations. What color will it be? Liberals are angry because the president might not go with the standard blue and white. Yes, this is a thing. All right, head over to StacyOnTheRight.com, Twitter at StacyOnTheRight, and also don't forget to subscribe. All right, we'll be back with more right after these important messages.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. I'm reading through the Old Testament now, and I'm coming to places that are named that I see on our Israel tour every March. It's really fascinating to think that Jericho existed way back in the Old Testament thousands of years ago, and I can visit there today. The same can be said for Jerusalem. The Bible literally comes to life when you visit Israel, the Holy Land. Now, we're going in March. My wife Allison and I, we lead these tours every March. So if you would like to go with us, you need to go to the website and check it out. It's twholyland.com, twholyland.com. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, just call us at 800-FAMILIES, option 5. That's 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and we'll send you a brochure.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Like you, I sometimes get bored with routine. I like variety. It causes me to step up and focus. Challenges and new experiences more often than not force me to grow. They call me to a new, deeper level of commitment. Too many Christians have settled for a nice, comfortable, predictable Christianity. But God is looking for uncommon, extraordinary commitment. That's why I'm drawn to 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 25. Listen to these words. It's really the eulogy of Josiah. And before him there was no king like him, who turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him. That's amazing to have God say that about a man. There was no one like him, no one. He was a man of courage and obedience. He lived a distinct, God-honoring life. The expression, he turned to the Lord, means he gave his life back to him. His life wrote his obituary. I wonder, what kind of obituary are you writing through your life? What is your life saying right now? Do you have an uncommon commitment? Is there distinctiveness with your walk and relationship with God? Are you reflecting that commitment to Him, or are you just mirroring the culture and environment and the status quo? God has called us to make a difference and to be different. Now, here's what I want you to remember today. Christianity is not just a way of life. Our relationship with Christ is a call to an uncommon commitment. Break out of the mold and lay it all on the line. That's exactly what God is calling each of us to do and to be.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
There is perhaps no more impressive or majestic symbol of the American presidency than Air Force One. President Trump believes the next generation of the aircraft needs some changes, including a new color scheme. Here's Chris Van Cleve.
The blue and white 747, known to most as Air Force One, owes its iconic look to President John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie.
So Kennedy wanted an airplane that built the brand of the presidency.
It's all part of this whole pattern of him trying to increase the visibility of the presidency as an active office and as a glamorous office, which he succeeded in doing.
Ken Walsh wrote Air Force One, a history of the presidents and their planes.
President Trump is perfectly willing to upend a lot of the norms of Washington and the conventions of Washington, and it appears that includes Air Force One.
Shortly after taking office, Mr. Trump took the unusual step of personally negotiating with Boeing for two brand new 747s.
Well, the plane is totally out of control. It's going to be over $4 billion. It's for Air Force One program.
They'll be delivered sometime after 2020, but may drop the iconic look for a new Trump-inspired red, white, and blue design.
Okay, so this is an actual news report about the possibility that Donald Trump might actually change the color of Air Force One. Que surprise! Yeah, it's so scary. Like, everyone's just, no, he shouldn't be allowed. He's not allowed to do it. Now, when Kennedy did it, it was, Camelot and all this stuff. And then no one else was allowed to change it because Kennedy was assassinated. And now you got Donald Trump, who's like, I think we could do better. Red, white, and blue sounds good to me. And everyone's like, no, I'm just waiting on people to say how red, white, and blue is so racist or something weird like that. So I wanted to give you guys some interesting facts about Air Force One. And you guys know I'm a White House buff. I've been to the White House, I think 10 times now. Been on the special agent, so FBI agent White House tour with the extra hallways and stuff. Been on that tour 6 times. And so I know all the facts and the stats about the White House. I know all kinds of interesting, cool things about it. Air Force One, that's another story. I've only seen it from a tarmac. Never touched it, never been on it. Now, I know I have 2 friends who've been on it, but that's about as close as I get. So I have to satisfy myself with, these, when it becomes a news thing, kind of buffing up on it and, dreaming of the beautiful dream of me one day walking around Air Force One and maybe even being on it when it takes off. Who knows? It could happen. So what do we know about this plane? Well, first of all, some interesting things about it. And there's a little bit more audio about the history of the Air Force One paint job, but let me give you a few facts before we get into that. There's a mini hospital on the plane. There are 3 levels and 4,000 square feet. The mini hospital comes equipped with, obviously, a doctor and all of the equipment needed to do full surgery and everything else. It's sometimes accompanied by a 747 Doomsday plane. The E-4B is the military code name for the Doomsday plane that's constantly on alert. It can stay in the air for days and outpace the explosion of a nuclear bomb. Air Force One can go 650 miles an hour, but that's hotly disputed. Some people say it can go 700 miles per hour, which is just a hair below supersonic. Yeah, that's something because the Air Force One is quite large. It can refuel in the air. That's not actually that, like what you would expect it to be able to be air refuelable. That's been going on for decades now. It can survive the blast of a nuke. It is not a bad place to be if a nuclear bomb explodes because the plane's actual body is designed and secured to withstand the blast of a nuke from the ground, rendering the aircraft a bomb shelter in the sky. And then with 2 kitchens on board, up to 100 people can be fed from Air Force One at any given time. So it's not that tiny kitchen. It's like a real serious kitchen. There are 85 phones on board. And it's also somewhat of a spy plane as well. It's a mobile command center during terrorist attacks. And it's really just an amazing feat of ingenuity and mechanical prowess on behalf of the people who constantly update it and design it and are working on the newest version. So what is that newest version about, and why are people so upset about this proposed change in the paint job? We're not talking about calling it something different. We're not talking about putting Trump on the side of it. We're just talking about changing the colors of the plane. It's number 8.
Mr. Trump would not be the first commander-in-chief to make changes to a presidential aircraft. Harry Truman left behind Roosevelt's nondescript sacred cow for the eye-catching Independence, painted as an eagle. President Eisenhower got the first jet, going with a standard military paint job. But every president since Kennedy has stayed with the look he created.
It's just the concern that President Trump, the showman, is going to go too far with changing the look of this iconic plane that so many people are familiar with. And a lot of people wonder, why do it?
Another of the reported changes, President Trump is considering a bigger, better presidential bed on board the new plane. The current bed has been compared to something like a futon.
Okay. And remember, one of the things Donald Trump is into is luxury and comfort. So it would be pretty obvious with them ordering a new Air Force One that the new Air Force One would have updated amenities such as the bed, et cetera, et cetera. And for $4 billion, come on, wouldn't it? Like, how could it not have a better bed than something that would be compared to a futon? If you stay in hotels, you know what that is. Those fold-out beds with the futon level mattress instead of having a nice, upgraded mattress in the couch. That is so uncool. So uncool. So there's that, but there's a few more facts, a few more interesting things. Like I was just discussing that the kitchen feeds 100. It does, but they don't actually have room for comfortably seating 100 people. Air Force One actually has room for 26 crew members and 70 passengers. So just shy of 100 people can be on board seated and strapped in. You've got assigned seating on Air Force One. Every White House administration has its own rules about who can sit where. Seating is always assigned on Air Force One. Nearly half the seats are reserved for the press pool and Secret Service agents. Over $660 million was spent on the initial production costs, and building Air Force One was outrageously expensive. The Flying White House cost $660 million, and the Air Force helped pay down the bill in $140 million a pop payments. So George Bush was the one who approved the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, and he did so during a flight on Air Force One. This was a flight that he was taking to Berlin, and he approved the details of the proposal that created the Department of Homeland Security, which was at that time a brand new department of the United States government that still exists to this day. Clinton used to blast jazz music on board when he was president, and the plane itself, get this, costs a whopping $56,000 every hour to operate. So that's pretty impressive, $56,000. Its range is limitless. Part of the benefits of aerial refueling is that Air Force One has the capacity to go anywhere, having an unlimited range, and it makes it unique and keeps it as the mobile command center for the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Almost 240 miles of wire run throughout the plane. It has more electronics than your local Best Buy. Nearly 240 miles of wire running through the plane, responsible for the phones, screens, and communication devices that make Air Force One so intricate and powerful. I mentioned there's always a doctor on board, and Bush Sr., the first Bush presidency, during that time, broccoli was not permitted to be on board of Air Force One. It wasn't allowed to be in the kitchen. It wasn't allowed to be served. And journalists used to watch Fargo on board. Bill Clinton used to get his hair cut on board. And those are just some really fun facts about it. I think when the president talks about changing the color scheme from the kind of muted sky blue and white to a red, white, and blue aspect, He's going along with his America First populist type of policy that he's been pushing ever since he became the president. And it's just not that surprising to me that he would want to do that. I also think, there are some perks and privileges that come along with being the president of the United States. And if the tables were turned and President Trump was the outgoing president in 2016 and 2017 saw Barack Obama be inaugurated, don't you think the reaction to all of these changes would be completely different? Everyone thought it was so cool when Michelle and Barack Obama redecorated the private residence at the White House. And then they had the redecorated residence with the new sofas and all of that. He ordered a new carpet for the Oval Office. He ordered those gold curtains. He had the new couches brought in. And that was a part of him coming in and kind of making it his own. And no one said a peep about how, this is so horrible. He's going against tradition with those gold curtains. No, he's so chic. He's so international. That's what people said. If he was the president right now and he was the one changing the color scheme of Air Force One, Republicans would be a little miffed about it, probably wouldn't care. And Democrats would be saying, this is a historic moment. A Democrat president is yet again the one to choose the color scheme for Air Force One. He's ordering a new plane, yada, 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 yada. Right? I mean, I just can't imagine them doing anything differently. I can't imagine them getting this upset over a Democrat making this decision. And what's funny is anyone who wanted to do this, like any president before this that wanted to make the change, could have. Clinton, Bush, the other Bush, any one of them, President Obama, any one of them could have ordered a new paint job on Air Force One, and there wouldn't have been anyone who could have stopped it. You don't need an act of Congress. You don't need permission. It's a part of the executive that they get to decide what they're doing with the plane. So there's a little bit more detail about the actual deal for the new plane. They're ordering it, of course, from Boeing Corporation. And they're paying $3.9 billion for 2 customized 747s. And that is less than the initial cost that was touted by Boeing. He actually negotiated them down a little bit. They were actually demanding more, well over $4 billion. And President Trump said he might cancel the order, and they came to the table and got a little bit better of a deal. And it's a 747-8 model. The 2 new planes will be capable of flying 1,000 miles farther than the existing version. They will also produce less carbon pollution. And it's the reason that they're doing this now, that they're ordering a new plane now, is because the 2 new planes will be a version of the 747 that are more fuel efficient 2-engine models. Air Force specs require the redundancy of 4 engines for the presidential aircraft. And so, actually, let me update that. More than $1.4 billion was negotiated off of the cost, which is pretty fantastic. And the delivery date kind of depends on how much testing the Air Force wants to do. The plan was to have the planes ready by 2024, when both of the current Air Force One models will be more than 30 years old. So I think it's worth us knowing these details, especially on a Friday afternoon in the summertime where we can kind of get these facts in. I'm interested in it mainly because this is where the president would be if anything horrible were to occur. And we would want him to be able to continue our government in the case of any emergency. We would want our leadership to be protected and to be able to carry on. But it's also interesting just because of the technological marvels that are available to us right now, and that the first plane lasted for 30 years. So this plane that'll be delivered in 2024, that's 30 years. That's going to outlast the lifetimes of all of the current leadership in Washington, D.C. That's on the older side. And we'll be looking at whatever the new version is, whatever the new paint job is, we'll be looking at that for 30 years. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with and what they decide to do. I think it's important for us to kind of pay attention to that because it's a little bit more of a fun topic instead of always having things that are kind of negative. So let's get into a few more details about the hacking of the DNC and the 12 Russians who are accused of the malfeasance. So you have these 12 Russian military intelligence officers who hacked into the Clinton presidential campaign and the Democratic Party. And they released the tens of thousands of stolen communications. And this was an attempt to meddle in the election. Now, remember, we have this straight out of Putin's own mouth that he was definitely only wanting to negatively impact the election and to drive a wedge between American voters. He was very effective in doing that. He didn't care if it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump because both of them represent a strong America in different ways, admittedly, but we don't have anyone who's up for election that Putin would like, because all of our elected officials are going to want to do things that make America economically powerful because they have to answer to the American people. So there aren't any candidates that we would have in our country that Putin would be like, okay, that's our guy. So he was not so much interested in if it's Trump or Clinton. It was more about him making Americans mistrust each other and causing our electoral process to be as fraught and negative and really just horrifying. And it really was. It was very divisive. It was very much a case of us having Americans no longer trust each other when it comes to politics. Anyone who's not the same political bent as yourself, you see it in the actions of the elected officials telling people, when you see these people out in public, you don't treat them correctly. You see it in the actions of the text messages of Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. He was in Southern Virginia and he could smell the Trump support. He never really did. He never really did explain that to my satisfaction. I don't know anybody who heard what he said who said, you know what, I get it. We get it. But it's not that we get it the way he wants. He tried to smooth it over. He tried to paper over it, and it just didn't work. Yeah, it just didn't work. So when we get back, we're going to talk about Scarlett Johansson and this trans movie that she was starring in and all of the fallout about that. I'm going to tell you how the Democrats never let you have anything. Even if you're on their side, they'll eat you alive in a minute because it's not about anything. Nothing. There is no standard. Everything can change. It's all about feelings and making sure that you toe the line. All right. StaceyOnTheRight.com is the website. We'll be right back.
A dear sister in the Lord, who is a writer for the AFA Journal, wrote an astonishing article about idols. In this article, she attests to the fact that if we are truly honest with ourselves, we will find things or people whom are more important in our lives than our relationship with God. Let's just say when I read this, I did my own soul searching and found a few. There are several passages in God's word where he tells us to not idolize things or people. Even the very first 2 commandments warns us about idolatry. In 1 John chapter 5, verse 21, John tells us to keep ourselves from idols. Idolatry is sin, and it could be your career, your marriage, your car, including yourself. John Piper says it best. Sin is what you do when your heart is not satisfied with God. How do you get satisfied and excited about God? Refresh your memory of what the Savior of the world did on the cross and ask the Lord to help you make him number one in your life. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Netflix continues to ignore the outcry about 13 Reasons Why. The American Family Association, along with Parents Television Council and several other pro-family groups, have reached out to the streaming service urging the cancellation of their program. Netflix has not even responded to our letter. Instead, they released an even more vile Season 2 and are producing Season 3. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings says their program is engaging and that it fosters discussion of taboo topics like suicide and sexual assault. But at what cost? 14-year-old Anna Bright and several other teens have committed suicide after watching the show. Hastings calls our objections propaganda. Does he feel the profitability of his company is worth more than the lives damaged or lost because of his show? Please sign our petition to Netflix, learn more, and share our action alert when you visit afa.net. And pray Reed Hastings will recognize the dangers of 13 Reasons Why.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
John Roberts, go ahead, John. No. John Roberts, go ahead. CNN's fake news. I don't take questions. I don't take questions from CNN. CNN is fake news. I don't take questions from CNN. John Roberts of Fox. Let's go to a real. Let's go to a real network. John, let's go.
Well, we're a real network too, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So that feisty interchange was in England as the president was doing a bit of a joint presser with Prime Minister Theresa May. And he only had 4. So they always lay out how many questions they're going to take beforehand, unless it's kind of an impromptu, the president steps up to the podium. But on a joint presser with another foreign dignitary, they're going to know how many reporters are going to get called on. Everyone's going to get a chance to raise their hand, but they'll delineate beforehand because they know how long they want to stand there. And so they'd already said beforehand there will be 4 reporters who will be called on. So the president already had in mind who was going to call on. Jim Acosta's in the seats. He decides, can I ask a question? Well, sure, you can ask one, but you're not getting called on. Now, I personally wouldn't have said, I don't talk to CNN, you're fake news, because he took a question from a CNN reporter when he was at NATO. A reporter from CNN asked President Donald Trump a question, and he answered it. So I just want to, let's, if you're following the timeline, and I know President Trump could be slightly punchy from all of the travel. He was in 4 parts of England just today. And I have to correct, I said that he would be at Trump Doral. I know there is a Trump Doral. I'm not sure where it is because he's actually going to Trump Turnberry in Turnberry, Scotland, United Kingdom. So that's where he will end up tonight at 8:35 p.m. / 3:35 p.m. local. So that's where he'll end up today. But obviously that kind of caused a furor online because when President Obama was in office, he actually treated Fox News this way. That's where Donald Trump's getting this from, is because President Obama was regularly rude and nasty to Fox News when their reporters would ask him questions and they would show up in the briefing room because they had a seat in the briefing room, as they have for I don't know how long. And so when that would happen, CNN would actually say, oh, I'm sorry, I am going to give my question to my colleague from Fox News. And they were very kind of collegiate or collegial. They would basically stick up for Fox News reporters in the face of kind of rude treatment from President Obama and Obama administration officials. And so what they expected was for John Roberts to say, Mr. President, I'm going to give my question to CNN, or CNN is a real news organization, but here's my question. And John Roberts just said, thank you, Mr. President, and asked his question. So he got taken to task on Twitter about doing that, and people were really rude to him about it. It was his choice whether or not to do that. I think the problem is he might have done that. He might have said, oh, Mr. President, I want to give my question to my colleague at CNN. But it was Jim Acosta, who regularly makes himself a total nuisance to Sarah Huckabee Sanders and to President Trump. I almost feel like at this point, you know how it is when someone has worn their welcome out, even if it's a work situation, because the president's not required to choose any one news organization to answer questions. He doesn't have to choose the same people every time. Everyone doesn't have to have an opportunity. It seems to me that CNN would send someone else because Jim Acosta has worn his welcome out. He's been so unprofessional that he's actually hindering CNN's ability to get in a question. maybe they will, but they don't seem like they're interested in doing that right now. So I just checked here. I was just double checking to make sure that I knew what the name of the actual building, that the actual facility that the president's going to be at tonight. And that was from today's daily guidance and press schedule for Friday, July 13th, 2018. And they've got all of the media coverage set up, and he's been, like I said, all over. And at this point, they've already probably left Glasgow Prestwick Airport in Glasgow, Scotland, on their way to Trump Turnberry in Turnberry, Scotland. So that's kind of an update on where the president is at this moment and what he's doing. And so we are going to have President Trump meeting with President Putin. They're meeting in a third country, and they're not meeting in Russia. They're going to meet at a third location, so not America, not Russia. And that's, I believe, the next stop for the president. So I mentioned just a tease last segment about this story about Scarlett Johansson. So if you're like me and you know people by these Hollywood actors by their last movie name, Scarlett Johansson is often known for her role in the Avengers series where she plays the Black Widow. So that's the actress that I'm speaking of. She was announced to be one of the stars of this upcoming film called Rub and Tug, which is a drama that takes you into the world of Dante Tex Gill, who is a man who's transgendered and living as a woman. Now, we could go into a whole hour-long segment into why this is so ridiculous and why this is happening right now. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. A few years ago, before I was ever on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, I kind of forecast, not just on Facebook, but on radio, numerous occasions. I said, what happens with this whole LGBTQIA, XXX, whatever movement is that it starts off with, we just want to be free to love whoever we want to love. We don't want to have to be closeted. We want to be in public like everybody else. So people who think that's all they want, people who are easily snookered, are like, sure. And they're like, yeah, loving in public isn't enough for us. We don't want to just be able to live together. We want to be like married couples too. We have every right to be married too. And we want to adopt kids too. We can't make kids on our own, and that's not our fault. So 2 men or 2 women should be allowed to adopt kids. Now, religious organizations said, well, you can adopt all the kids you want from the state, but you can't come through our religious organizations because we believe marriage is between 1 man and 1 woman, and that's the law of the land. And they were like, okay, fine. We want to change the law of the land because we want to be able to adopt kids. Now, remember, they first told you, if you keep in track, that they just wanted to be able to love whoever they wanted to love because you can't control who you love. So as soon as they started making those moves, we start talking about gender reclassification, the role of men and women, whether or not you could call someone your husband or your wife, because 2 gay men, they can't have a wife. They only got 2 husbands. So they said it's not enough to say spouse because spouse still has that traditional meaning. We want you to say partner. Now, remember, most people, when you say your partner, you're talking about your business partner. But now millions of Americans refer to their husband or their wife as their partner in acquiescence to the gay agenda. But that wasn't all. We don't want you calling parents because that doesn't acknowledge gays. You can't say dear moms and dads. That doesn't acknowledge that there might be 2 men or 2 women sitting in the audience who are parents too. So we need that redefined. We need that changed too. Caregivers. Everybody is a caregiver because you don't know how they came by those kids. If they didn't have them through their natural processes like traditional couples do sometimes, because not all traditional couples are fertile, then how dare you say parents? You don't know how these people came to be there. You say caregivers. So as American institutions, from public education to hospitals to any organization that employs people, begin to change and modify their behaviors, the way they talk, the labels that they put on things, the way they hire people, the benefits they offer to people. We don't just want to love who we love. We want rights to see them in the hospital when they get in a car accident. I want to be able to have my same-sex partner on my health insurance through my job. You married people can do that. I want to be able to do it too. every change we made to say, yes, you're that sounds reasonable. Okay, no, I don't like that, but I'll do it. I'm not homophobic. I'm not a bigot. Every single step, they need something more. I said early on, as did many other people who are, have written books and are famous and definitely have credentials. Everybody was saying at the same time, it will not stop with same-sex marriage. They have to keep going, because once they've normalized that, they're going to have to normalize the transgenders. The transgenders aren't very numerous. They're a teensy-weensy segment of American population. They're going to have to be moved out of the this is an illness into this is normal behavior. You have the problem, not them. If you normalize homosexuality, you have to normalize transgenders. What comes after the transgenders? You have to normalize relationships that are what they call unconventional or inconvenient, but are actually against the law. Male-child relationships between men of age and underage, boys and girls. Multiple relationships in one marriage, meaning more than one woman with one man, more than one man with one woman, a group of people being able to get married. They're already moving for this. The polygamists up in Utah were like, finally, we get our day. We can have our polygamy and come out of the shadows. Everything that was once a mental illness or something that wasn't normal has to be now normalized, because we opened the door. It's not just open. They blew the door off the hinges, removed it, and made it into just a big opening. You know how you can have a door between two rooms, and then someone will say, let's make this open concept. And then you blow the door out, you remove all the framing, and you reframe it back out, and it's just a big opening. You just walk through, no door. That's what we've done. So how can you be surprised that Scarlett Johansson, who is an openly leftist chick, she is openly on the left. She believes in she's a proponent of homosexual marriage. She's a gun control nut. Anything you can think of that the leftists believe in, she's right there with them, pounding the drum and doing whatever she needs to do to be a part of the crew. Now, remember, in Hollywood, actors often play roles that are nothing like themselves. Men have done roles where the entire role was a woman. Think of the Wayans brothers and all the movies they've been in. They had a movie called White Chicks where they weren't just men acting as women. They were black men acting as white women for the whole movie. They were made up. I mean, it was just like the most ridiculous thing. And it was a successful, popular movie. Over and over and over again, Hollywood gives people Oscars for acting in roles that are completely the opposite of who they are physically, because in their minds, that kind of acting requires so much more talent than just someone who is a woman playing herself in a role that, may or may not be that groundbreaking. This is the Hollywood mantra. I mean, think of it whatever you may. This is the way they've always been. So for them, Scarlett Johansson has the name, ID, and credibility to be able to pull off this role. But that's not what this is about. In Hollywood, and with the LGBT agenda, if you're going to make a movie about one of their pet projects, one of their movements, their idealistic goal points that they're trying to hit, then you need to do it their way. This isn't about Scarlett Johansson so much as it is about her being a heterosexual woman, and they feel this role about a transgendered man should be played by a transgendered man. Now, remember, it's misogynistic to say a woman can't do something unless you're a liberal and she's being trumped by another demographic. And I want to do this on the show, and I got to work on it, but Wheel of Demographics. You listeners would call in and you have to tell me what your demographic is, and then I spin a wheel with demographics all the way around. So it's man, woman, white man, white woman, black woman, black man, transgender, homosexual, Muslim, obviously, as or someone who practices Islam, Jewish, Christian, and then you spin the wheel and you see which of the, if your gender or your demographic, not your gender, but your demographic trumps the demographic on the wheel. There's actually a methodology. So Scarlett Johansson definitely has a woman card that she can play that can trump a white man. But when it comes to transgenders, transgender trumps white woman every time. They want a transgender to play that role, and they have now pushed her out of this role that they chose her for, because since she's already famous and has name ID, they thought that she could get the people to buy the tickets to come see the movie. Because If they make a movie about a transgendered man and tell his story and it's a flop, then that, they feel, is indicative of Americans not accepting what they're trying to push down our little gullets about accepting transgenderism. So there's a method to all of this. So here's what the Variety magazine is reporting. She has just announced that she is actually exiting the movie after standing up for herself and saying, I don't know what you guys' problem is. I'm acting in this role because I'm the actress that won the part. I'm going to do justice to this story about this transgendered man. And online, they were like, no, you're not. You can't do justice to it because you're a white, cisgendered woman. In other words, you like men. In light of recent ethical questions raised surrounding my casting as Dante Tex Gill, I have decided to respectfully withdraw my participation in the project. Our cultural understanding of transgender people continues to advance, and I've learned a lot from the community since making my first statement about my casting and realized it was insensitive. I have great admiration and love for the trans community, and am grateful that the conversation regarding inclusivity in Hollywood continues. According to GLAAD, LGBTQ plus characters dropped 40% in 2017 from the previous year, with no representation of trans characters in any major studio release. She goes on a little bit, but suffice it to say, the mob has cowed her into submission, because it's not really about inclusivity. It's about everyone doing what they're told to do. Garbage. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this. Stay here.
Urban Family Talk.
I'm Miki Addison of Urban Family Talk, a division of American Family Radio. We're calling on Christians to push back against the enemy's attack on families. To that end, I'd like to invite you to our Marriage, Family, and Life Conference. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Drama is being added to the upcoming meeting between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin after Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced that 12 Russian intel officers are being indicted for hacking and meddling during the 2016 presidential election. Rosenstein saying the 12 targeted employees and volunteers of the Hillary Clinton campaign, as well as members of the DNC, in an effort to steal information and release it at a later time when it could cause the most damage.
The defendants falsely claimed that DC Leaks was a group of American hackers and that Guccifer 2.0 was a lone Romanian hacker. In fact, both were created and controlled by the Russian GRU.
President Trump is scheduled to meet with Putin next week, but Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling upon the president to cancel the upcoming summit in the wake of the indictments. The pro-life group Live Action is raising concerns about Hollywood stars and their outspoken support for Planned Parenthood. Charlie Butts has the story.
Since the movie Mogul Harvey Weinstein scandal broke, women alleging he sexually harassed and molested them, many of those same actors have been openly supporting the nation's largest abortion chain, Planned Parenthood. Actors such as Kristen Bell.
I stand with Planned Parenthood because I want my girls to have access to birth control behind my back one day.
Another well-recognized actress released a video statement.
I'm Scarlett Johansson and I support Planned Parenthood.
But in Live Action's undercover work, Planned Parenthood workers, as in this example in Richmond, Virginia, were facilitating birth control and abortions for minors involved in sex trafficking.
You can get birth control like anything without a parent. The only thing it requires over 18 if they're a minor is an abortion. But there's also ways of judicial bypasses we can get around that if you guys ever need it.
So Live Action, in the complete video released this week, is asking, when the Hollywood standouts complain of sexual harassment, how they can endorse Planned Parenthood and funnel millions of dollars to the abortion giant when they have been proven to consistently facilitate trafficking of young girls through birth control and providing minors with abortions in violation of state laws, and then sending them back to the molester. I'm Charlie Butts.
There's another auto recall over defective airbags. Chris Foster reports.
Nissan's recalling nearly 105,000 cars with Cicada airbag inflators. They can explode and send shrapnel at drivers and passengers. The announcement covers 2011 Versa sedans and 2011 and 12 model Versa hatchbacks. 50 million Cicada airbag inflators have been recalled over the years in the United States. The explosions have killed at least 23 people worldwide with about 300 injuries. Chris Foster, Fox News.
The National Education Association is under fire for its decision to give former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick its highest award. Bob Kellogg reports.
On July 1st, the NEA gave Kaepernick, who gained notoriety by kneeling in protest during the national anthem in football stadiums, their President's Award for his fight against racial oppression. Stone Washington of Project 21 believes that Kaepernick's motives might be self-serving.
I just really think that he has more of a self-imposed reason for his kneeling against the anthem. I don't think that he's fighting against racial oppression or that blacks are being discriminated against, targeted by police. I just think that it's more of a reason he created himself.
FoxNews.com reports NEA President Lily Eskelson loosely compared Kaepernick's work to that of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., something with which Washington strongly disagrees.
And I'm a very major fan of Dr. King and his work, and I'm familiar with his I Have a Dream speech. I just don't see any comparison between what King said and what Colin Kaepernick is trying to insinuate with his kneeling against the anthem.
Other recipients of the award included former First Lady Michelle Obama and LGBTQ activist Chris Skro.
And U.S. health authorities are alerting consumers to a new scam involving fake government warning letters sent to people who try to buy medicines online or over the phone. The FDA says the fake letters may be part of an extortion scam. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
My name's Keitha. My friend was shot dead on a Metro Transit bus, and if I wasn't here at Teen Challenge, that could have been me. But thanks to them, I'm off the streets and I'm drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
They have a narrative which is ideologically driven, and whatever the president does, they will attack him. And sooner or later, this will bear certain political consequences for them. My concern is that they're upping the ante on the things that are truly undemocratic. Yes, they'll smear us. They smear you, me, whoever they pick to be the next Associate Justice. But the issue is when it comes to harassment and the use of violence. There's no equivalent of Antifa on the right. Doesn't exist. Does not exist. There's no story of...
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt.
There's no story... There's no story like James Hodgkinson at the baseball diamond just a few miles from where I'm sitting. You don't have Republicans go out with a hit list trying to kill Democrat congressmen. Guess which side that happens on? It happens on the left.
So true. That's Sebastian Gorka chatting with Sean Hannity on Fox News about the ridiculousness of all of the violence that's being called for in reaction to simple, small things like the president exercising his right as the chief executive to appoint a Supreme Court justice, or him working to seal the southern border and using the same methods that were used by presidents before him. Yeah, I mean, cue the outrage, but I don't get it. So welcome back to the program. StacyOnTheRight.com, at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. Welcome to the program. Happy Friday to you. So we talked a little bit about this. There's pressure to confront President Putin at the Helsinki summit after the Mueller indictments. And so, again, it's not just me who finds the timing of these indictments to be interesting. You've got Special Counsel Robert Mueller announcing a slew of new charges against Russian nationals on Friday for conspiring to impact the 2016 presidential elections here in this country. Well, it was actually the entire national election for up and down the ballot, lots of different candidates. The news actually is thought to turn up the heat on President Donald Trump to confront Russian President Vladimir Putin when they meet in Helsinki for their first summit, and that happens on Monday. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who announced the indictments, asserted that the timing was based on the facts, the law, and the Department of Justice policies. Now, I think it's interesting. Yeah, sure, it's based on the facts, it's based on the law, it's based on when they can get an indictment back. But I don't think it's a mistake that the indictments come down on Friday. He's in Trump Turnberry for the weekend, resting and recuperating from NATO and from Great Britain. And then he'll be in Helsinki on Monday. And the summit in Helsinki, there'll be a lot of things discussed. Obviously, the president is going to have to broach the subject of how, Putin actually took a satellite nation back under his own control during the Obama administration. And there's not a lot that Donald Trump can do about that now, because the time to have done something about it, to have prevented it, was when Obama was the president. But he wasn't able to execute any strength against Putin. Putin seemed to have the upper hand in that relationship. And so he did what he wanted. And now that he's done it, they've built some kind of seaport there. I mean, it's not like the Russians just rolled a few tanks in there. They rolled a few tanks in there, fortified the position. They built a seaport there. They now have enough assets there to maintain control. So again, it just makes me think back to a couple of days ago at the NATO meetings when Donald Trump was saying, look, this is so silly how Germany gave this huge chunk of their energy business to Russia. You can't trust them. They cut the lights out in the Ukraine on occasion when they were controlling their electricity. Like they will not hesitate to. So you don't want to do what we want? We'll cut off your energy. That's how they are. So you can trade with them all you want. If you don't get your pencil shipment from Russia, you're going to be all right. You can get some pencils from someplace else. Just resharpen what you got or use a pen. If they cut off your energy, what you going to do? You're going to suddenly just switch over to your dual redundancy backup network? You don't have one of those if you're doing business with Russia for your gas pipeline. It's not like we can just set up a gas pipeline overnight to you. It has to be, it's a time consuming, it's a process. It has to be done over time. And that is why the president was so flummoxed at this idea that Germany is going to get the bulk of their natural gas from Russia. But meanwhile, they're still in NATO complaining about how Russia, encroached on Crimea and took it and yada, yada, yada. And they would do it again. Russia would be doing that and more if it was Hillary Clinton. Well, I don't know. She was pretty scary. She's a total neocon when it comes to foreign policy. She likes going to war. So they might not have been as pushy with a Hillary Clinton. She did have a couple of strong suits. And one of them is she's kind of on the cray side. And I think Putin would have found dealing with her to be pretty difficult because she's wily. So the point of it all is that he is going to go forward with this meeting, and they are going to sit down and they are going to talk, and this story will be kept up in the news. It will be something that the liberals use, especially at the press conferences that are held in Helsinki. When they hold their joint press conference, Putin and Trump, someone in the audience from CNN or one of the other lefty news outlets is going to say, so, we've indicted this many Russian nationals, and they're going to want to ask that question of Putin, and they're going to want a corresponding, kind of co-question to Donald Trump about, did you discuss it with him? What did he say, et cetera, et cetera. That's the news media's job. So I'm not really impugning them for that. But whoa, just think about foreign policy wise, if you're trying to, and President Trump has said on numerous occasions, he's trying to normalize the relationship with Russia. And it is very volatile. If you read any of the websites that are not so bombastic, that don't seek to demonize the Russian state for everything. And this isn't about me being a black Russian, as I named myself on Twitter for about a year after that whole, everything Donald Trump does is about being Russian. And that was me poking my finger in the eye of those who feel like this is a conspiracy of some sort. It's not. But do we not want normalized relations? So it doesn't mean that we give up on holding them to task for what they did in Crimea, which was an illegal act. It doesn't mean that we don't require them to abide by the agreements that we've made or sanction them. It doesn't mean we lift the sanctions. It just means that we seek to normalize the interaction so that we're not constantly bumping into each other in the military operational theaters in which we share space. In Syria, we have buzz actions going on between the different aircraft. The Russian aircraft buzz our aircraft while they're in the air. We have flyovers. We have near collisions in the air. We have a lot of, there's a lot of confusion on the ground about what part of what operating theater, which troops are in, and what, are those your troops, or are those Syrian troops, or are those insurgents? And there's so many different operations going on. That's dangerous for our assets and our human beings, American citizens who have their lives on the line supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States. When we have volatile relations with foreign military powers like Russia, who they have their finger over the button just like we do. They have a huge nuclear arsenal. And remember, the idea of having a huge nuclear arsenal, that was an arms race type of a thing. You only need a certain number of nukes to completely obliterate your enemy. It's not about having 1,500 nukes, which we do have. It's about having enough nukes with the capability of getting off, and it's mutually assured destruction. So we do need to normalize the relationship. And I think for everyone who says that Donald Trump he's wild, he doesn't have any sense, he's nonsensical, he's this, he's that, they always say such horrible things about him, but he seems to want to normalize the relationship with Russia. It's not, normalization doesn't mean we agree on everything or that we even come to a place where there aren't sanctions anymore. It just means that we move out of a almost hyper aggressive military posture because we don't want a nuclear engagement. There's a difference there, in my opinion. Clear thinking, smart people who can get outside their feelings and kind of put one block in front of the other and see where the line would end up. You can kind of predict, look, if we keep engaging each other militarily this way, if we keep having all of these, really, it's not good stuff going on in Syria and in the Middle East where we have troops and where the Russians have troops. If we keep having that going on, there could be an accidental type of an aircraft gets buzzed or something happens and then a pilot engages and then you have a downed military aircraft. I mean, we've had world wars for less than that. So we want normalized relations. And I think those who are really wanting to demonize Russia and connect it to Donald Trump, they have their own agenda at mind that they're working on. But it's not an agenda that takes the time to consider the ramifications of the hyper-aggressive military posture that we currently have against Russia. It's not like having a hyper-military posture against Cuba. It's a totally different thing. And while we are a more advanced military and we certainly have a larger economy, we have more people, and they have to struggle to keep up the pretense of being our equals, they still have an enormous nuclear arsenal, and they have a viable military. It may not be perfectly on par with ours, but it's close enough, and they're constantly working on it to the detriment of their citizens, of course. But that matters not. Your military missiles don't not land because the citizens in your home country are starving or don't have adequate, whatever. The missiles are still going to land on their targets if they're functional and operational and they're being utilized by people who know how to make them work. So I think we should have a better grip on that. And the president seems to. And I just wish that the Democrats could get out of their posturing and their constant vilification of Donald Trump to just take a few seconds to say, look, we still don't like you, but we definitely want to calm down the rhetoric between our two nations. And we want to get some normalcy going on between our military operations in the Middle East so that we don't accidentally trigger something horrible that we can't come back from. So everywhere you look online, you've got this. Well, first of all, I don't know if you guys saw it, but there's this bizarre video of Peter Strzok smirking at the hearings where, so somebody, Caleb Howe, you can look him up on Twitter, Caleb Howe, he was on the program a couple weeks ago. He had this GIF of Peter Strzok smirking and kind of giving the evil eye. It's now a GIF that they've made that has been retweeted thousands of times. And I saw it today. You can go to my Twitter feed. I think I retweeted it as well. Where, I mean, I just don't even know what's going on there. Now, anyone can manipulate almost any video to look any way that you want. But this is some like very interesting stuff that's going on. And now, on top of that, there's a bizarre video of him smirking. It's a video that's gone viral because people just don't understand what was going on with him in that hearing yesterday. He was so smiley, like he had a smirk on his face the whole hearing. It's kind of fascinating. So other news breaking today is that President Trump may tap up to 30 million barrels from the oil reserve to halt the rising gas prices. He feels that OPEC is manipulating the market, and he wants to keep oil prices decent for Americans because it's the height of the summer. It's the height of the summer travel season. And then there's also, and I know you guys, it's Friday, and I shouldn't be doing this to you, but it only lasts for a couple seconds. Here it is. Hillary Clinton 2020. It's now a viable thing. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a second, what did I do? Why do I deserve this? You don't deserve it. You don't deserve this. You deserve anyone else, really, to be the Democrats' nominee. But she's out there actually going to events that the presidential hopefuls are going to. So these large kind of conferences and large speaking engagements where they get to kind of, it's like practice, but it's also a new group of people that may have never heard Elizabeth Warren speak or Kamala Harris. And so they keep having these events, and their front runners are getting the news late in the game. Oh, Hillary Clinton's also going to be speaking. We've added Hillary Clinton as a speaker. So they're now saying that it's absolutely possible that Hillary Clinton may indeed run for the presidency yet again. Mounting speculation that former Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is seeking to make a comeback to challenge Donald Trump a second time has become more than rumor. Clinton gave a campaign-style speech today at the American Federation of Teachers Conference in Pittsburgh, where she said in part, "We have to gear up again because the challenges we face now are truly unlike any that we have seen for quite some time. We thought we had won. Now the pressures and forces against progress are stronger than ever. They control our government, and they are determined to have their way." Oh my goodness, y'all. It couldn't be better for Donald Trump if she runs. If she runs, Donald Trump 2020 is real. I'm all here for it. I'm here for that, okay? We'll be back with our next guest right after this.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a health care plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit *345. That's *345. *345.
Hello, I'm Pastor Joseph Parker, and this is Daily Time in the Word. It's our goal to help you better understand the great blessing of spending time in God's Word every single day. Today I want to talk with you about kingdom prayers found in the Word of God. What difference did it make that I prayed today? And what difference did it make what I prayed for? Did it make a difference at all? Allow me to share with you a wise answer to that question. It made and makes all the difference in the world because you prayed, and specifically because you prayed certain kingdom kinds of prayers, prayers that come straight from the Word of God or that are based on the Word of God. These kinds of things often will happen as you take time to pray these sort of prayers. God will put you on people's hearts and minds who otherwise may not have you on their mind. People may seek you out specifically to ask you to pray for them or to ask for you to pray for wisdom for them. A unique opportunity for ministry just drops into your lap, quote unquote, out of the blue. Opportunities to minister and bless people come up regularly. These and other miraculous things can happen because you ask God for these opportunities. Not only is God willing to answer these kinds of prayers, he's looking for disciples who will pray this way daily, and he'll use them to do miraculous and great things. One prayer that I want to encourage you to pray every single day is the prayer of Jabez over yourself and for your family. This is the prayer of Jabez. Lord, bless me indeed. Expand my territory. Cause your hand to be mightily upon me, and keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain. It's good for you to pray and help your children pray it daily, and also pray it over your family. Lord, bless my family indeed. Expand its territory. Cause your hand to be mighty upon us. Keep us from evil, that we may not cause pain. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. I'm Stacy Washington, your hostess with the mostest on Friday, as I like to call it, going into the weekend. And we have so much news and information for you, including our next guest, who is fantastic, if I do say so myself. It's Joel Gilbert, Hollywood film director, presidential historian, Middle East and foreign policy analyst, and now guest on the program. Joel, thank you for coming on today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me today.
You know, I'm interested in what you have to say about the possibility, because I'm holding back my giggles and my laughter, of Hillary Clinton running again. Could this be? It's a gift to Donald Trump if it is.
Well, I'll tell you, I wrote an article for American Thinker a week ago last Friday called Here's Why Hillary's Running in 2020. It got picked up and went viral. Michael Goodwin, New York Post, pretty much copied it without giving me credit, but that's okay. It got picked up on Drudge and everywhere else, and it's just been in the news quite a bit. But I kind of started it off by explaining the obvious, that number one, she's never stopped campaigning, really since 1992, but especially since 2016. She's continuing to campaign all over the world. Donald Trump is racist and sexist. His supporters are deplorable. She keeps telling everybody she won the vote by 3 million votes, and you know, if it wasn't for that damn Constitution thing, you know, the Electoral College, and Russia, she should be president. So I laid out that she definitely wants to run, that the Clintons never quit. It doesn't matter, Benghazi, Whitewater, Monica Lewinsky, you know, impeachment, Ken Starr, email server, they just don't quit. And it's that life mantra she has that always talks about. Her mother told her, it's not when you get knocked down, life is about how you get back up. So she's clearly still running, and she's the only Democrat with a path to the nomination that can say, here's how I can win. And I'll tell you how she can do it quite easily. She has a lot of loyal supporters, name recognition. She gets an easy 25% of the vote in any primary, Democrat primary. And you'll have 10 other people at, 5 or 6% each splitting the vote. That's the same thing Trump did. He had a solid base of supporters, and every time someone dropped out, he'd pick up about half their vote, and the other half would be spread around. And that's how Trump won, and I think it's going to be an irresistible idea for her to do that with the path clear. A lot of probably the best one or two Democrats are going to think, well, Trump is going to be tough to beat, and Hillary's going to be in it with all her money. I think I'll wait till 2024. So I see an easy path for Hillary, and she's the only candidate with a fundraising mechanism in place for like 30 years. She's also got about $1 billion in Clinton Foundation donations, stashed away for a rainy day. You don't think all that Russian money went to hungry children in Haiti, did you?
Oh, my gosh, no.
So she has a clear path. She's got the money. She's got the name recognition. And I do see her running, and the media jumping on board, saying, hey, she's got unfinished business. She's going to break the glass ceiling. So I do see this coming down, and I don't think it's a joke for Trump either.
But I thought everybody was sick of her. Like just a couple months ago, everyone was so sick of her and Bill Clinton and talking about how poorly he handled the questions about Monica Lewinsky. And so instead of him getting to promote his book with James Patterson, he spent all of his time talking about how he never apologized to Monica Lewinsky and how he may have handled that incorrectly and he paid a big price for it, yada, yada, yada. How do they get past that with this Me Too movement, or does the Me Too movement go the way of Black Lives Matter and just fade into the background when they're told to because it's Hillary
the Democrat voters didn't care about Clinton's indiscretions when he was president, that Juanita Broderick had a credible allegation of rape. They didn't care about it. I don't think they care about this issue right now. The question you're asking essentially is, how can the Clintons have a rap sheet that would make Al Capone blush, and they still stay in the game and never get prosecuted? And you even saw that recently. Lisa Page sent that text to Peter Strzok saying, hey, be careful with Hillary because, she might be president. So the way they stay out of jail is to make the jailers fear them, make the prosecutors in fear of them. So the minute they stop running or don't have potential to take power is the minute they'll be thrown in jail. So that's another reason they have to run. And, the Democrat Party has been conditioned to vote for any Democrat. It's good versus evil. They're racist and evil. They want to harm you, and I'm going to protect you. I'm going to give you the free things. So I don't think it's an impediment at all that they have such bad reputations on any level.
Well,
And
because they're Democrats.
Go ahead.
Well, because they're Democrats, because that would not work with Republicans. Republicans would not keep allowing the same old
Correct.
candidate to run again if they were corrupt. Now we'll just ride a dead pony into the night. Look what we did with Mitt Romney. I mean, we knew he was never going to win, but we still kept putting him up until finally now he's running in Utah and he can't win there now. So I do get this whole, it's like people in politics, some of them have this rubbery consistency where just when you think you peel the last of them off of your shoe, you look back down there and they're back on there again. They're just there again and they're never going away. But let's talk a little bit about the realistic threat that the Democrats have raised on their own. They've grown their own internal threat, which is socialists. Socialists are now beginning to not just be kind of their little secret or their pet project in the dark. Socialists are now popping out in public. Ocasio-Cortez is to me, the symptom of what has metastasized within the Democrats, which is they've trained American children to love socialism. They've trained them to hate capitalism. And so you have millions of American teens who are now millennials. They're voters, and they like the sound of single-payer health care and a government wage and a government providing you with a house. And as much as mainstream Americans oppose that, they have a significant number of their party who want to oust Schumer. They want to oust Pelosi. They want to see Maxine Waters gone because they can never be radical enough. How does Hillary Clinton win those voters over?
Well, what you've seen, though, is the Democrat Party really, over the past 8 years, and a little bit before that, was engaged in stealth socialism. Mm-hmm. This was the theory of what Obama was up to, where they pretended to be mainstream. Obama ran as a mainstream candidate in 2008. I'm going to cut the deficit in half. Marriage between man and a woman and God. Obey the Constitution. On and on. It was very mainstream. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he didn't mean any of that. The actual policy, the agenda, was to throw the voters under the bus and pursue this radical agenda that nobody voted for. So what's happened since Trump became president, and even during the campaign against Hillary came out as the real open radical she was. She was a follower of Alinsky from Chicago. She said, we're going to have open borders, executive orders. If Hillary had won the presidency, she would have finished off the United States with this radical socialist agenda, and you could all kiss our Constitution goodbye. And don't laugh or think that, she doesn't have a chance against Trump. The Democrats right now are out there registering as many people and as many cemeteries as they can in 5 swing states in 5 counties. And that was all the difference. It was a very small margin that Trump won. I think you'll recall that Hillary did not concede because after the election, because she was waiting they were holding back certain numbers of votes in certain states and counties in case it could reach the margin. We later found out in Detroit and Michigan they had tremendous voter fraud. So the Democrats specialize in voter fraud, whether it's cemetery voting, early vote. That's the big thing. Vote early, vote by mail. You get all these mail-in ballots, and then people show up to vote as well the day of the election. Every type of voter fraud the Democrats will employ, and Hillary's well aware of that. You've also got, voting machine fraud that George Soros and his gang are now in the voting machine business. What a coincidence. So Hillary believes she's on the right side of history. They believe they represent our values, but they also believe that, as Saul Alinsky taught them in Rules for Radicals, that the ends justifies the means. So I expect, America to remain in grave danger as one of our two main parties is a radical socialist party that will do anything to take power. And I think if Hillary does win, whether it's in this election or if another Democrat wins in 2024, they're not going to leave it to bumbling, leave it up to bumbling FBI texters or the IRS to fix another election. 2012 election was not clean. It was fixed by the Democrats. They used the IRS to suppress the Tea Party to prevent them from organizing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Obama cheated us and interfered in 2012. He interfered in 2016 using the DOJ and the FBI to try to frame the Trump campaign, prevent them from winning, or impeach him if he did win.
Mm-hmm.
Spygate. And this is what radical Marxists do. They have to use the tools of state to stay in power because their policies are completely failures. No one would vote for them.
So, Joel, there's only one other avenue by which, because you've clearly delineated how I was giggling at the beginning of the interview, but I'm totally dead serious now.
No laughing matter.
Yeah, it's not funny anymore. But there is one issue that Hillary Clinton can't overcome unless there's some kind of bionic serum that I'm unaware of, and that is she'll be 73 in 2020. Not only that, but she struggled mightily on the campaign trail this go round, getting tossed in the back of her, Scooby bus like a side of beef. She fainted, she coughed, she stumbled. They have video of her stumbling down the stairs in India a couple months ago. She's clearly not in the best of health. Does that play a factor here?
No, it does not. I'll tell you why. First of all, she'll be about the same age as Trump. It's not like she's running against someone who's 40 or Ted Cruz was 45, so it's not going to stand out at all. In terms of her health, most people don't know some of her history like I do. She's been fainting for 30 years. It's just part of her makeup or blood pressure or something. She's always been fainting and had this kind of these health spells. And it's nothing new for her, and it's nothing that she thinks is so bad. It's just because the electorate was kind of introduced to it all at once from that, falling into the Scooby van, and then Trump made light of it. But, the steps in India, it really was, she had some flippers or slippers on that were kind of sliding, and she didn't really faint. But it's nothing new for her. And other than that episode, which was not a health issue, she just keeps on keeping on. The Clintons never quit. She will never quit. So I don't think the health and age is an issue.
Wow. I just thought she was just so frail. Like she looked like there was always something wrong with her, but then she would bounce back. It was almost like she had a body double. After she was thrown into the back of that van, she was seen outside her daughter's apartment in New York, and she looked like a totally new person, almost like she'd lost 10 pounds. And I was like, does she have a body double? Like, how could that be the same person?
That to me. I remember looking at it. It was not a body double. It's just, I guess you must know some people that have had fainting spells, low blood pressure, certain things happen, they get too much heat. And that's Hillary. She's been doing that for 30 years. So it was no big deal to faint. I think she had, that concussion or something she had. She hurt her elbow. She fell down the stairs. She's had these for many years. So it's not something that is a sudden episode of ill health. It's just something she manages her entire life. And she manages it quite well, honestly.
Golly. So what's the answer for the rest of us? Because when you talk about the voter fraud, that is something that Donald Trump tried to attack the very first moment he entered office. He set up a commission to try to clean voter rolls across the country. And even the Republican governors wouldn't cooperate with him in his efforts to make sure that the Soros setups could be dismantled. How do we fight back against any of this when, as she pointed out,
it's the biggest challenge because they've if you ask for voter ID or say we need voter ID, they call everybody racist. Hillary just needs to win 300% of the vote in 5 counties in 3 states. And by the time we figure out and say, hey, wait a minute, you can't have 300% of the vote, there's only 100% of the people. And by the time we figure that out, it'll be new Attorney General Keith Ellison's going to call us all racist and put us on a hate speech watch list for saying that too many people voted. It's racism. So it's the biggest challenge. They're out there right now today talking about early vote by mail. Here in California, they're going to give illegals driver's licenses, and you're automatically registered to vote under motor voter. So it's the biggest challenge that I think patriots are going to have to rally once again to save America from a final defeat at the hands of the now openly radical Democrat Socialist Party, led by Hillary Clinton, because that's all they have left, and that's what they're going to be up to, and they're up to it right now.
Well, we had a lot of exposés going on from Project Veritas, but they kind of got hip to his game that he was able to get into their inner circles and get them to admit to things, and the media blacked out the coverage, so most Americans don't even know the absolute truth that Project Veritas was able to ferret out about the Democrats and their voter fraud. Much of what you're discussing here today. You've got to come back on. We'll have you back. I'm thinking in a couple of months we'll have to have you come back on and we'll go into this subject again, because we have to have people who are on the ground, who are already working in their local party apparatus, or doing maybe they work for the registration, or they work for the county and the county seat where they do the voting on election day. We have to have more Republicans show up for that, because that's where you can catch a lot of voter fraud as well, people voting without IDs, et cetera, not following the law in their state. And we often have those county positions go unfilled here in St. Louis, and I think it's that way across the country for the Republican side, because people don't feel like they need to volunteer to do that.
It's a small part of the equation. Vote by mail. I've got videos of Obama and Michelle Obama telling people it's really easy, get your vote by mail. Imagine how many people can be registered through these Democrat La Raza, voter registration drives that are illegals, and then they ask for a by-mail ballot, and they just mail it in. By the way, voting is a way to help establish citizenship. So people that are, illegal are going to want to vote, because it'll help them establish the ability to stay over a long period of time. So the vote by mail, early vote, you can vote early. Vote early and often is what they say. It's a huge challenge, and that may be the only way that Hillary could win.
Well, we got to put a stop to that. Thank you so much, Joel Gilbert, Hollywood film director, presidential historian, Middle East and foreign policy analyst, and writer whose work is so good it gets lifted off. So
that's right. And don't forget my new movie, Trump, The Art of the Insult, artoftheinsult.com.
Fantastic. We'll check that out. Thanks, Joel, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure. Great interview. Scary. I'll talk to you a little bit about what we can do so that we don't go into the weekend feeling down about Hillary's prospects, because it sounds like it's real. We'll be back with more after these messages. Go to StacyOnTheRight.com, hit the subscribe button, and also AFR.net and UrbanFamilyTalk.com. We'll be back with more. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Did you know that the Centers for Disease Control did a study on defensive gun use by Americans? Probably not, because the report destroys gun control talking points. A Florida State University criminologist didn't know either and did his own analysis, which showed that Americans used guns to successfully defend themselves against attackers over 2.2 million times a year. This number is based upon an unweighted nationally representative sample of over 12,000 individuals. Data from the CDC confirms this result. In fact, CDC data proves Americans used firearms to defend themselves 3.6 times more often than perpetrators utilized firearms to attack them. This information was kept private by the CDC because it doesn't support the gun grabbers' mantra that all guns are bad. Instead of hiding data, let's spread the truth far and wide. Lawful gun owners use weapons to defend themselves and others millions of times every year. Sounds like gun control to me. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StacyOnTheRight.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
We need you to call your senators today. Tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood.
Here's what you missed on Airing the Addisons.
I'll say this. What I think needs to happen is I think the husband needs to, never in front of anybody, because an audience always escalates the situation. It could be something real simple that the two of you have discussed before, but when you've got eyes, a second set of eyes, I don't care who it is,
you're right?
It always escalates the situation. And you could say something the way you would always say it, always talk about it, but one element different, just having one person, now it's a performance. You see what I'm saying? And so you always want to make sure that you don't do that. And so I think if, speaking as a wife, I want to know as close to that moment as possible in a way that protects my feelings that I have injured you.
Tune in weekday mornings, 6 to 9 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Vilification. To be borked. It's now in the dictionary. Completely unfair vilification. Looking back, most people agree now that this episode was grossly unfair, insulted the intelligence of the American people, and stained the history of the United States Senate. Jeffrey Rosen was a Democrat who worked in Senator Biden's office on the Democrat side during that episode. Here's what he wrote a few years ago. He said, I remember feeling that the nominee was being treated unfairly. Senator Kennedy set the tone with a demagogic attack. Bork's record was distorted beyond recognition. It was bad for the country. This was a man named Jeffrey Rosen, a Democrat who worked in Senator Biden's office during this episode. And here's what a lawyer who helped lead the anti-Bork effort wrote just last year. Regret, he said. I regret my part in what I now regard as a terrible political mistake. Seized with guilt after all these years of having participated in this borking. Because of that episode, he goes on, quote, we have undermined public confidence in the judiciary.
Wow. So we're pivoting over now to Judge Kavanaugh and the possibility of the Democrats launching the same type of attack that they launched against Mr. Bork. And he was completely destroyed by what was done to him then. And he had his judicial record and his reputation so maligned. And it was really just, it was the kind of mauling where nothing but lies were purveyed against him, just a complete attack and destruction of this man's public persona and character and his record as a jurist. And it stands to this day. It's so much so that Democrats who participated in it at the time admit now that it was wrong, that they felt it was wrong then. They weren't sure, they weren't exactly sure what to do to stop it. They participated, and now they regret it. And now you have Judge Kavanaugh, who is going to be going up through this process. And I just we have to be prayerfully considering, really just praying for him, because he has a wife, he has children, and these are real people that are going up for these positions. And we have allowed the politics to become so feverish and crazed that we don't view the opponents as people. And when I say we, I'm loosely roping us in, but I honestly, from the left, as was pointed out earlier by Sebastian Gorka in that audio clip on the Hannity show, there is no Antifa on the right. Imagine what would happen if a bunch of conservatives dressed in American flag T-shirts showed up with American flag bandanas over their faces and started beating people up. The left would never put up with that. They get away with the violence because they just deny it in your face. It's like you're being gaslit. That's not happening. They didn't burn down those cars. They didn't destroy $2 billion of property in California just because some conservative speaker was coming. You just hate. You're full of hate and bigotry. That's what they do. So we know for a fact that there's a tsunami of negative lies coming against Judge Kavanaugh. And we have to be prepared. I think that our number one weapon in this is prayer. Now, McConnell has been on a real tear. He's been in rare form, cracking jokes from the floor of the Senate in his own dry way. And so this was no different. He started to take to task this idea that somehow Judge Kavanaugh is a horrible person because he likes to attend baseball games, so much so that he would use his credit card to purchase tickets. And he ran up quite a little bit of, a credit card bill purchasing baseball tickets to go to the games with his friends. And then he paid the credit card off over time. He made payments and paid off the bill. Now, that may sound like a big nothing burger to you, but Democrats have really been riding him for liking baseball. Mitch McConnell had a few things to say about it in number 3.
Judge Kavanaugh's impressive record, impeccable credentials, and his enormous bipartisan fan club of judicial peers and legal scholars all attest to the outstanding service he would render on the Supreme Court. I'm glad that outside fact checkers are already swatting down Democrats' desperate attacks on his nomination. In a breaking news bombshell report just last night, we learned that Judge Kavanaugh enjoys America's pastime. Investigative reporters scoured his financial disclosures and learned that he and his friends buy tickets to baseball games and that he pays his bills. So as you can see, there's still plenty of silliness to go around. I urge every one of my colleagues to treat Judge Kavanaugh's record truthfully, treat the information process with the respect that it and this institution in which we serve deserve.
And he's right. I think one of the things that we're going to have to do, because that's where we win our battles, is when we pray specifically for very specific outcomes. And it's not that, a general prayer can't be impactful. God hears all of our prayers. He answers. But when we are specific, we're literally lasering in and honing in on that one thing that we're praying for, and we're going for that. And we really got to get there. We got to get there because, so you listen to Joel Gilbert, who was our guest last segment, talking about this idea that you're going to have, basically Hillary Clinton running for the presidency until she dies. And then Chelsea, because that's the extension of this. It's Chelsea Clinton running after her mom goes away, then it'll be Chelsea. There has to be a stop to that evil. That kind of evil has to be stopped. In the same way that, he talked about mob bosses and the way that they would continue to intimidate so that they wouldn't ever be prosecuted. And there was an answer to that. We had attorneys general in this country in different states, and then the Attorney General of the United States band together and work to crush mob bosses. Now, they still exist, but they are not running whole cities the way that they were before, where they had whole cities under their boot and they were in control. They were the de facto control mechanism. And the Clintons' de facto control of the Democrats is what brings us to a place where Democrats are no longer even Democrats, they're socialists. And where so many Americans are waking up to the fact that the Democrats are socialists and they're horrified, but they don't know what to do. We have to pray for God to intervene in this situation. Because we're talking about literally the difference between having freedom and not having it. And he wasn't exaggerating when he said if Hillary Clinton was president, I've said it myself, borders are wide open, gun rights are gone, and any of these things that you see them just doing to people who dare to stand up and say, I don't want to bake a cake, and they run them out of business, run them out of public life, the kind of stuff they're talking about doing to Trump officials, harassing them. If you think their ideas are radical now, imagine how radical and empowered they would be if they were in charge and Hillary was the president. Just think about it. every nightmare. There it is for you. So we have to pray for justice. So I'm going to give you guys a scripture, and I'm going to have this as one of my new, things that I utilize on a regular basis. And one of the most effective things we can do as Christians, which when you learn this and you start doing it, you see the results, you see how God responds to that and how he blesses it, you'll be more motivated to do it even more. It's Psalm 7, and it's a prayer for justice. And this is where you're reading the scripture back to God, his word back to him. That's perfect prayer. And I'm going to give you just some of it. It's 17 verses. And the version, I'm thinking I want to go to the King James. New King James? King James. Let's go to New King James. How about that? All right, so it's a prayer and praise for deliverance from enemies, a meditation of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning the words of Cush, a Benjamite. O Lord my God, in you I put my trust. Save me from all those who persecute me and deliver me, lest they tear me like a lion, rending me in pieces while there is no one to deliver. O Lord my God, if I have done this, if there is iniquity in my hands, if I have repaid evil to him who was at peace with me, or have plundered my enemy without cause, let the enemy pursue me and overtake me. Yes, let him trample my life to the earth and lay my honor in the dust. Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Lift yourself up because of the rage of my enemies. Rise up for me to the judgment you have commanded. So the congregation of the people shall surround you. For their sakes, therefore, return on high. The Lord shall judge the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to my integrity within me. O let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. For the righteous God tests the hearts and minds. My defense is of God, who saves the upright at heart. And it goes on for a few more verses, but I encourage you, Psalm 7, and I'll post a link to this on Bible Gateway. I love Bible Gateway, by the way. If you're looking for a place to quickly research a scripture or look something up, Bible Gateway is a perfect place to do that. I'll post this in the comments so you guys can click through to it. When I find a scripture that I really like, you can highlight it in your Bible and you can turn to it. But sometimes it's great to just print it off on the computer, and then you have it at the ready where you can just grab it and be like, oh, I have one that I shared with you guys on the air that's literally a photocopy that I took out of our bulletin at church, where our pastor had this little confess the scriptures. It was inside the bulletin. So I photocopied it, and then I have it here for use when I'm in here in the office when I want to confess the scriptures. And you can confess any scripture, but this particular little grouping of scriptures that was recommended to us by our pastor, I find that to be very effective and great for me personally. And you're going to find whichever way works for you. A lot of my friends that I know, they have their Bible app on their phone, and they use the Bible app. They use all of the different features on it. And I do that too, but sometimes the piece of paper is much more helpful in reminding me because I use my phone for so many other work-related things. So Psalm 7, which is a prayer and a praise for deliverance from enemies. And we need deliverance here in this country. A country of 300 some odd million people, literally on the brink of destruction, and one family is at the helm of that destruction, the Clintons, and that there will never be a relief from them because they just won't stop. It's kind of astounding. And I have to be honest with you, as I was listening to Joel talking about, it was a very, very somber interview in my opinion. And I thought to myself, but wait, Hillary Clinton's not in good health. She's just not doing that great. And then he explains she's always been a fainter. That's why they didn't treat it as a big deal. That's why none of her staff were really impressed when she fainted. That's why they just tossed her in the back of the Scooby van. They saw her going down. They're like, Secret Service steps in to provide coverage. They just hoist her in there. They lose the shoe, whatever. She has a million shoes. We're taking her to her daughter's house anyway. We're close to the daughter's house in Manhattan. It was just a matter of routine for them. So while we wish and hope and pray that Hillary Clinton would come to know the Lord, we also know that we can still pray to be protected from the Clintons. As a nation, this should be something that we as Christians unify around, to pray for deliverance from that family. And, that you know how you cut the head off one snake and two other snakes appear. You got Bernie Sanders, who's still alive and kicking and very, very healthy. And you have, like he said, Keith Ellison and so many others who are just, you know, they're not here for a prosperous, self-controlled America. They're here for socialism. They're here for domination. And socialism is just communism light. And they know it and we know it. They're here for control, command and control. It's not about doing things that are instituting policies that work, that bring peace and prosperity to Americans. It's about sticking with what they've been promoting, even though it doesn't work, but winning anyway. That's what the border is about. It's about bringing people in here who are illegal that they can register to vote anyway. If you don't believe, because Donald Trump has said it so many times, that the 3 million votes that Hillary Clinton got, we don't even know if those are legal votes. Do you understand? You got Illinois joining California and giving illegal aliens driver's licenses. If you have motor voter, your driver's license is your voter registration. You're in the country illegally. Are you going to vote for the guy who wants to seal the border? The guy who wants everyone working instead of receiving welfare payments? I don't think so. We have to be wise and we have to be prayerful. And this isn't one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'll pray about that. Yeah, I'll pray for you. Yeah. That's not going to work. You have to be of the mindset that you are going to pray about this because you believe that God answers prayer. And he does. He absolutely does. All right, that's the show and that's the week. Happy Friday to you. Have a great weekend. God bless. And see you on Monday.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban